This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. Respectonomics is bringing you this presentation this morning. And I say this morning, I usually try and keep to a sort of democratic idea of not disclosing the time of the day and the place. We're in the middle of some dreadful winter weather. So Sarah Benton, my co-host, is unable to join us this morning. And we're going to be talking about customer service. This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I am your voice of Respectonomics. The program is called The Living Asset and deals with the issue of the living nature of the human being and recognizing the asset nature of the human being, hence the living asset. Before we go on, let me also point out that we are now operating the very small mini podcasts, as we call them, and this is the Living Youth series. They run for about 3 or 4 minutes every day, 5 days a week, and you are certainly encouraged to listen to them. What they are is stories. They're called Pelge's Pebbles. Pelge's Pebbles is a family story with a message or a pebble in each one. It might deal with manners, it might deal with eye-to-eye contact, it might deal with the use of good English. Have a listen and share it with your families and, of course, in your community. This one is called customer service. This is the area that we want to talk about. And one of the problems with customer service nowadays is it has become a universal, uniform issue. Universal in the sense that customer service is deteriorated, frankly, in every market, every jurisdiction in which we operate. And then on top of that, what you might call the complaint or the recognition of customer service is extraordinarily uniform. We all have these favorite examples of where customer service has failed. One example I will give, I don't usually give examples, but here is one. And that is, for 40 years, we have been customers of this particular dealership, that automobile dealership. It's the Toyota dealership, and brand new car, and approximately 2 kilometers away from the dealership, the car failed. It literally wouldn't start. It's a hybrid, and there was some problem with the harness. I called the dealership, called the service desk to say, can you come and help me, please? It's urgent. I was stuck in the middle of the road. And the fascinating response was, no, you have to call another number. And another number, of course, was one of these 800 numbers, toll-frees and whatever. But the fact of the matter is that the customer service in the traditional, proper, conventional sense failed. And what was also interesting was that culturally, as I talked to people about this, the answer I got back frequently was, in fact, across the board, uniformly, the answer I got back was, oh yes, that's how it's done today. And I think that's how it's done today, is that ghastly throwback to the days of, well, we've always done it that way. It's not acceptable. So we're going to be talking about customer service, and I'm asking, recommending, encouraging, coercing all of us to get this message out. This is a message that needs to go out to fellow employees, fellow co-workers. It's a message that needs to get across the management board, whether it's a chief executive officer or chief financial officer, whether it's a first vice president. Let's get this message out there. And let me explain the reason for this. Because customer service is, in fact, the end result, if you will, or the beginning result of a product or a service. The key, though, is there's not a business in this planet that doesn't look to differentiate itself. And what you've noticed today is the lack of differentiation. You look at the automobiles, for example, how extraordinarily sort of vanilla wrapped they have become. If you got into many cars, you wouldn't really know whether you were in a European or a Asian, Japanese, North American vehicle. You really wouldn't know any longer. the sameness, this uniformity is everywhere. And every business is interested in differentiating itself. And by not differentiating itself, it's losing market share, it's losing productivity, it's losing new customers. There's a tremendous cost to this uniform approach. So let's have a look at it. I'm not going to, first of all, talk too much about the structural reasons for it, meaning that the way an organization has been put together, the lines of command, the lines of management order, and so on. I'm not going to get too much into that, but I want to emphasize one thing, though, and that is many businesses today and many governments today operate on the silo philosophy. And the silo philosophy is one where you have a silo in your organization. In fact, you have multiple silos. No silo will talk to the other or connect or collaborate with the other silo. They become very self-interested, self-absorbed, self-entitled, and self-enabled. Silos are really, in fact, if you think about it topographically even, they're really rather ugly. I mean, you go to you look across a farmland and you see a silo. It's not something that you sort of greet and say, what a beautiful sight. Now, you might say it's beautiful if you were storing grain, but it's not a beautiful sight architecturally or visually. So the silo is not a particularly clever way of running a business. And also, there's another thing about silos. They tend to be not only internal, the way we've described them, but they tend to be external in the sense that a silo is almost an excuse for climbing to the top of the silo and looking around and not actually having any responsibility for what is out there externally. When we go to a corporation and discuss this uniformity issue, we are often confronted with liability issues. We can't do that because the liability is A, B, and C. We have it from the standpoint, of course, of regulatory requirements. So there is some, what you might call, not excuse, but there's a reason for having a uniform approach. The problem is that the uniform approach has now become accentuated through technology. So, for example, if you believe that 10,000 employees ought to be doing something different, at a click of the switch, the mouse, you get the message out to 10,000 employees. And you can hear the forensic accountant rubbing his hands with glee and saying, I've got the information out there. Most of us are extraordinarily aware of how little information is ingested, is understood, is received, is enjoyed even when it comes to us in the form of pixels on the screen. We are human beings, and as human beings, we respond best when in fact we have conjunctive relationships with another human being. We are neurally constructed. We work well through body signals and signals of the eyes, signals of the intonation in the voice. We do very well. We are designed, in fact, to be in community with one another. The other thing that's coming across in the fast lane is artificial intelligence. One of the problems with that is, again, it becomes a silo in and of itself. It is not definitively, it is not forward thinking. It is not imaginative. The I stands for intelligence, which is a question, and the artificial says it very well. It is, in fact, an artificial construction based on historical information, but it provides for this uniformity again. Press the button and we all get the same answer. So what we're talking about here is how the employee has lost the art or the ability, the privilege of being an individual. Now, a lot of people would say, well, that's just the way the business runs. But we've already pointed out that when you have this uniformity, you also lose the ability to differentiate yourself. The human being is entirely differentiated. If you go into the detective's office in any police station, they will talk about the thumbprint, won't they? They say, well, the thumbprint is unique to the individual. And therefore, let us also add, or let us build on the premise that the individual is unique to the individual. Now, if we're going to have individuality on talking about it, is it too much of a stretch? Seriously, is it too much of a stretch to think about the customer being an individual? Because here's the difficulty. If we as employees are not treated as individuals, it is very likely we will not treat customers as individuals. And you see that in many ways where the customer is treated as almost a unit of purchasing capacity, a sort of very clinical, neutral, synthetic kind of entity, and one that doesn't really command respect. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of corporations today find customers rather irritating. And that, of course, contributes to the silo, to the avoidance, to the don't let me have a dirty Kleenex. All I want is to have clean information. So the answer here is that the individuality of the employee is critical to the individuality of the customer. We need to put the two together. So if we're going to agree that the individuality of the employee is so important, that we agree that this individual needs to be able to have a sense of initiative, a sense of empowerment, a sense of being able to think in terms of what the customer is asking for at that particular point. In other words, acting as human beings. Now, if we agree on that, then it is only fair that you and I will ask one question, and that is, okay, I'm not being treated as an individual. How do we get individuals to be treated as individuals? Because when we're treated as individuals, we have a greater ability, greater capacity to bring new innovation, new improvements, new enhancements to the whole reality of customer service. So let's have a think about this. And the first thing is the senior management, whatever you care to define that as. It might be the chair of the board, it might be the directors, it might be the senior vice presidents, it might be the vice presidents, it might be the chief executive officer. But every corporation has this wonderful glossy image of these are the people that are running the show. These are the people who know the new markets, they knew the products, they know the services, they know the finances. And that's fine. But do these individuals actually know what's happening at the front line? So the first thing that has to happen is that that senior individual, define it as you will, but the senior management, senior individual, needs to correspond with face to face, person to person, eye to eye, presence to presence with frontline employees. In other words, what you want is the CEO of the bank to go and stand with the proverbial, we don't call them tellers any longer, but let's be honest and talk about someone at the front counter who's counting out some money or accepting a check or whatever it would be in that instance, that that individual is in fact being drawn alongside by the chief executive officer and understand what are the trials and tribulations, what are the pleasures, what are the enjoyments of that particular role. I heard recently of a fast food outlet that told its employees, do not engage in conversation with your customers. That's not what you're here to do. What an incredible indictment, not only of humanity in its purest sense, but also what an incredible abrogation of the ability for that business to engage with customers in a useful and enjoyable manner and a fruitful manner. So, first of all, we are claiming, we are pleading that the CEOs, etc., will in fact start talking to, drawing alongside the ranks of the frontline employees, start enjoying what they're doing, listening to what they're doing, hearing what they're doing. And you know what? Maybe walking from their workstation to the lunchroom, maybe going outside and seeing how the parking lot works, but thinking in terms of what is it like to be that individual at the front line? Because that frontline worker, at the very point of the transaction taking place, represents the entire confection of that corporation. It's all there. It's like a funnel. It's all come into one place. So how on the earth can we realistically diminish the value of that one place where the contact, the transaction is taking place between the customer and the corporation? We think in terms of, therefore, of the senior management being involved. We need to think of the front line in the sense of being engaged. I'm not sure how often a frontline worker, a frontline employee, is actually asked for their opinion. And this isn't the same as filling in a survey. It's not even the same as putting a coupon in the recommendation suggestion box. This is where we have the proverbial CEO going to that individual and saying, hey, we know what we're doing right because we know that we've got you here. We know that the job's going well. We know that the customers are coming in. We know all that. But tell us, what are we doing wrong? That's not an original question. Well, I suppose it is. It's original because it came from Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, that we can actually say to another individual, where am I going wrong? Where are we going wrong? It requires vulnerability. It requires a sense of internal courage to say to somebody, where am I going wrong? Not many of us ask that question. You only have to go into your friendly marriage or into your local community, into your local service club, faith organization. When do you ever hear that question? What are we doing wrong? Where have I been wrong? Tell me. But being able to be open to that is, of course, the ultimate in accepting complaints. What is more valuable than knowing what we're doing wrong so that we can fix it, so that we can improve it? Improving means getting rid of the deficiencies. And you're telling me, carte blanche, free, what I'm doing wrong. What a fabulous investment. And then there's the issue of employee support. And by that, how often do you hear the senior manager again, but where does not feel or believe that they have the support of, excuse me, that the junior, the person at the front line doesn't really feel that they have the support of management. You see, the arrangement is very coercive. It's very top-downish. It's you shall do, excuse me, you shall do the following. What would be far more valuable would be an arrangement by which the manager would arrange to be the supporter of that employee. In other words, let's go to the coffee shop. And that is when the senior manager or the manager goes to the individual at the front counter and says, what can we do to support you? Not just what are we doing wrong, but what can we do to support you? Because a lot of employees are terrified of making mistakes because they know they're going to get eviscerated. That's a kind of a big word to say, getting chewed out. And what a dreadful thing for an employee to feel that if they make a mistake, they're going to be taken to the proverbial cleaners. That's wrong. No, of course we make mistakes. The human being carries three characteristics, every single one of us. Each one of us is fallen, each one of us is failed, and each one of us is fallible. So let's not say that corporate hierarchy sometimes ameliorates all that and gets around it. It's not true. We are who we are. This is our lot. And we can better our lot by supporting each other. I want to say three other things that I think are important. I believe are important. Excuse me. I believe this. And the first one is we need to have small groups. Small groups are a wonderful way of developing confidence, developing new ideas, and breaking down barriers. And the small group isn't made up of three people on the production line. It's made up of people on the production line, people in the finance department, people in the design, marketing, wherever. But across the board, bring together on a regular basis a small group. Small does not mean 300 people. Then you get into the sort of bureaucratic regulatory bloat kind of thing. No, you want to have a group of, say, 10 people where you can talk freely about how's your day going? What are we doing wrong? What can we be doing better? How can we support you? What if the production line worker was asked that same question? What can that individual do to support management? These are questions that are totally reciprocal. They're totally reasonable. They are from one human being to another without any barrier. The next thing we need to think about is we live in a world of electronic communication. We all suffer from pixelitis. The old written letter. Do you remember when you used to get a written letter? And you got a letter and you got this rather nice blue, crisp envelope. And quite often you were even careful how you opened the envelope. And inside was a handwritten note. Dear Jeremy, it might say, we so enjoyed seeing you yesterday. Thank you very much. We'll be sure to tell our friends about what you're doing. A handwritten note is one of the most powerful vehicles available to any of us. It's personal. It takes a little bit of effort. It doesn't just come off a keyboard. And it means you've got to seal the envelope. You've got to get a stamp, or you've got to hand deliver it, however you want to get it there. But a handwritten note is one of the most powerful tools there is. I've still got handwritten notes that were written to me 40 or 50 years ago because they were so valuable to me then, and they are so valuable to me now. And the last thing is, I want you to come to an idea with me. Respectonomics was formed on the premise of the human being. And the human being is made up, and this may surprise you. Maybe it doesn't surprise you. Maybe you just know this, but nobody's actually sort of put it on the table. But you know what? Each human being has three components. We are triads, we are triumvirates, we are tripartite. We have a body, we have a mind, and we have a soul or a spirit or an inner being, that internal reservoir. Let's talk about each one for a few seconds. The body is the body. How wonderful it is when one body draws alongside another body, when senior managers and employees are body to body. And the mind that allows the communication to take place. How is your day going? What is going on today at the production line? How are the customers doing? What do you hear these days? That's where the mind interpolates with the other mind. And it's a wonderful method of communication. But thirdly, be frank, be honest, be terribly, terribly open to this. Every human being has this inner antenna. Some people call it a spirit, some people call it a soul, some people call it an inner being. It carries a lot of different definitions or even explanations. Whatever. Everybody knows what I'm talking about this inner part to each and every one of us. And here is one of the most extraordinary human privileges that we have. I can draw alongside you body to body. I can share my ideas with you, mind to mind. But when I enable my inner being, my soul, my spirit, to communicate and to engage with yours, no words, no flattery, no electronic communication, just an absolute willingness to open my spirit to your spirit. And that is when we achieve harmony, and that is when the mind and the body come together in ways that are beyond any sense of intellectual proportion. In other words, it is a real game changer. Body, mind, and soul, let all three come forward. Let all three interact, interpolate with the other human being. And then when we do that, we have the ability to differentiate ourselves, differentiate the company, differentiate the community, and you know what? Even to differentiate the nation. So this message is a very important one. Customer service depends on individuality, and we need to express that individuality. And if we're going to express it, let's share it. Let's put this word around. Let's tell other employees, let's tell other directors and other managers and other constituents that this is the way that we can raise the level of service one to another. And I also want to point out one thing. This is coming to you as a voice over an internet, and that's fine. But we need human contact. So we need respectonomics to be brought forward in workshops. We need respectonomics to be there in speeches. We need respectonomics to be there in presentations. It's available. It's called jeremy@respectonomics.com. And if we can get this word out and start sharing it, let me tell you what happens when we share the word. We share these truths. Take your chessboard. Seriously, a chessboard with 64 squares on it. And if you on one square put 1 grain of rice, and on the second one you put 2 grains of rice, and on the third one you put 4 grains of rice, by the time you've got to 32 squares, you will have covered the entire world's population, all because we added 1 grain of rice in the first place. So let us be the one that adds the grain of truth, the grain of contact, the grain of sharing, and the grain of engagement. Let's go for it. This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley, and I rest my case.